All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome y'all to the August 12th meeting of the Traffic Board. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. Um, uh, Just to start us off, following our agenda that was sent in your packets, we will start off with a roll call. My name is Anthony Ladd, and I'm the Public Works Division Manager for the City of Kalamazoo.
Christina Anderson, I'm the city planner.
Dennis Randolph, I'm the city traffic engineer.
Scott Vanderandy, Executive Lieutenant, Operations Division for Public Safety.
Leslie Hoffman, System Manager, Central City Parking.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Included in your packets today was the agenda for today's meeting and also for the minutes from our last meeting in April. Didn't know if you'd had an opportunity to look at the agenda for today, but if somebody would like a motion to approve it, we could move on to the minutes from last April.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Now second.
And virtually, we'll do this the same way we've done the tree committee. Unless there are any objections, hearing none, agenda's approved. Also for the minutes from the April 8th meeting, was there any corrections or any adjustments that need to be made to that?
I would move that we approve the April minutes.
Someone like to second that?
I can second that.
All right. Any objections? Hearing none, we'll move forward with that approval as well. Next item is our new business. We have 3 items today that were brought to our attention to be included on the agenda. 2 of which I believe are being presented by Central City. I assume, Leslie, that you have the most background on these requests.
Sure.
And I guess we can go ahead and talk about the metered handicap spaces in front of the Comerica building first.
Yeah, so I'm representing Kalamazoo Downtown Partnership. And excuse me, and I guess for Chris Shook also on these spaces was involved, but currently on his property are those, I believe there's 8 metered handicap spaces in the alley there, right off Rose Street. They kind of sit off right up against his building. And those are mainly used by employees that work in the Comerica building. And then they are empty, after hours and on the weekends, they kind of sit there empty. There isn't a high use for them. And so we were thinking that those could be some prime spaces for just regular parkers. There's a possibility of a new restaurant going in that building. And we saw some use for just regular parking after, not Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, after those hours. And so the question is, can we have handicap spaces that are only handicap spaces a specific time and day, and then become open to everybody else all other times? I don't know what the rule is on that.
And Dennis, I believe that you had some either prior knowledge of this request, or I don't know how involved you might have been, but is there any precedent that you've been aware of?
Yeah, I am not aware of a timed handicap marking location. And I guess that's what it really is. My concern is that they tend to be signed really directed towards handicapped, and how we might make it clear that it was only a part-time use is my biggest concern. I think especially with the police, and we know nowadays, especially citizens tend to almost self-police those spaces, how we could make it so we didn't have people confronting each other about why are you parking in a handicapped space. Practically speaking, we could put up a sign for a timed one, and I would be concerned if there was some type of zoning requirement, or if that the handicap spot was there because of a requirement that a building owner or a business had. But again, my biggest problem is how we would make it really clear to folks that during certain times that handicap didn't apply. It would seem, especially for the police, it would be making a real problem for them to be able to, public safety, for them to enforce on this thing. And I think that's why we really need to be concerned about that. We need handicap spaces. We have to provide them, I think. But anyway, those are my original thoughts. I haven't come across anything like this anywhere yet.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Practically, you could put up a sign that, regulation wise could allow something like that. I guess I would still have some reservations in that area as to where our next available handicap space would be. Because even if it is a restaurant, maybe you don't need all of those spaces that is usually occupied by business during the daytime.
But we do have some right there on Rose Street. in
Are
front
there?
of
Okay.
America, and then across the street on Academy, the first two spaces on either side are handicap. These were, this was an arrangement years ago that Chris did with the city. He offered his property for extra spaces for the parking system, kind of a shared thing. They do belong to the parking system, and we monitor them and take care of the spaces, but there's an easement. It is on their property, and the need, there's somebody that rents space in the Comerica building. There's a great need for handicap spaces and extra spaces in that area. And so normally, it's my understanding just from the past that normally, you put so many parking handicap spaces in per block or per area, and you try not to cater to specific needs, because that could get out of hand, and so Chris's building had a specific need. He had the property that could, he could donate for that. And so that's how those spaces came about. And so I know the need for the handicap spaces is there. I mean, they don't want those to go away. It was just creative thinking on could they be used alternatively when they were not in high demand.
Yeah, and I guess the other concern that I have is, if you have somebody that parked there at 7 o'clock at night, and then what happens on the next morning when their car is still there,
Right.
that becomes an enforcement or towing or, ticketing problem. That's not a unique problem, but that's just a point. From an enforcement or planning and zoning aspect, I mean, any thoughts or concerns there?
As it relates to zoning, the zoning code doesn't specifically call out the number of handicap spaces. That is the accessibility code tied to building code. Buildings need a required amount of parking, except for buildings in downtown. They are parking exempt, right? Because you assume that you're using shared parking spaces. So there really isn't a zoning issue to weigh in on as it relates to this. I think it's ultimately just the practicality of whether or not, we could reasonably administer them as something other than handicap spaces after hours or on the weekends.
As for the enforcement side of that, I believe that falls under the jurisdiction for Central City Parking.
It does.
Is that correct, Leslie? Yeah. So our park enforcement isn't in that area to enforce those spots.
I guess, Anthony, I believe that confusion is a problem. If we wanted to eliminate the spots, I think that would be the approach if there's just parking needed, so that we didn't have to do some type of really convoluted signing out there. You know, either they would be handicapped or they wouldn't be handicapped, I think would be the best approach, to just keep it simple for folks to be able to understand.
Yeah, I mean, I picture myself driving down the road, you know, my comfort level of pulling into a blue painted spot, it feels wrong. You know, if it was something that citywide we were looking to maybe do, and that would be an education piece as opposed to just this one particular area, or particular spot. I think it would take some education or understanding, certainly create some confusion in the process. Not necessarily opposed to it, but I do think that that's something that would probably need to be either more thought about, or I mean, is there any abject support or opposition from the board?
How many spots are we talking about in total?
I believe there's 8 now.
Which are all
Is it-
designated handicap?
Yeah, it's just as you, it's in the alley. I believe that's Exchange. Yeah. And they actually sit off the road.
Right.
Yeah. And they're metered handicap spaces.
Well, yeah, if we're talking 8 spaces and no, I think that's a lot of spaces. If we wanted to change some back to regular parking, I think that, you know, if we wanted to leave like 2 or 3 or something like that, depending on the size, I would think that just eliminating part of them, I would be strong about having some, though I think it's good. It's just maybe going down to 2 would work in my mind. For no,
Well-
I haven't got any real reason for it though. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think they're willing to give up any of the handicap spaces. So I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I guess that would be kind of my thought. Is there a way to flip that to where they were either reserved parking spaces?
Oh, that's creative.
To where,
Make
You know,
them
the-
reserved and not handicapped, just
Yeah.
reserved from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then they're open.
right?
That's a unique angle. I like that.
I think if there is a building requirement though, whatever that is, you know, you still want to make sure, I don't think that exempts them, you know, they might be completely handicapped accessible spaces, but they might still need to be designated as such with signs and proper paint.
Well, I think these were like over and above. I think they were in addition to what was required, you know, for the area. It's on private property, but there's an easement. It's considered part of the parking system, even though it's not on city property. It's kind of an unusual arrangement.
would you want to maybe approach them with that thought and see?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, why don't, I'll take it back and we'll, discuss it and then I'll bring it back
Sure.
to the committee. Okay.
Sounds great. Okay, so we will table that for now, and then if there's additional thought or something else to bring back, we can revisit that.
Okay. Mhm.
The next item also, I guess, had been brought to us by, I don't know if you're representing somebody else for this one, or if this is a Central City
No,
request.
I mean, I guess in a way, it's still coming from Kalamazoo Downtown Partnership,
Okay,
but it's on behalf of, there's a restaurant that is, I don't know if it's a done deal, but they may be moving into a space at the mall and South Street, where I think that was Fandango's, maybe, yeah. And they are going to have some outside eating in the future, and there's a handicap space right there beside their building on South Street. And so the request is to relocate that handicap space, moving it to the other side of South Street. And I don't know if Dennis, I think you were going to go out there and look at that
Yes.
area. But so I think eventually, and they're not asking for permission for this today, but I think eventually they're hoping to maybe have a parklet kind of place where they would, put tables actually in the parking space and have it, barricaded off in that. And because there's not a lot of sidewalk area there on the side. So I think that's what their hopes are for the future, and that's a whole different conversation, But in the meantime, we were coming to see if we could relocate that handicap space, because we wouldn't want to interfere with the handicap space for something like that.
I did go out on that site and walked around quite a while. And it seemed to me that there is quite a bit of area right on the mall for tables and for setup. And for that reason, I think they can do their outside dining there and in front of the buildings next to them. I would be glad to go with you and talk with them about that a little further, try to understand better what's going on. Right now, I wouldn't support doing or that request, but it's mainly because I think I saw some alternatives. And again, I'd be glad to meet with them
Okay.
to talk about that, if that would help. And then we could come back to the board if we need to.
Yeah, that would help.
has that area on the mall ever been utilized by that restaurant it does look like there would be ample
Yeah.
space.
So
No,
Fandango did have seating out there, but it was not as robust as the seating that you see out there now. It was they kind of picked it up every night, if I believe.
I think they did.
Yeah, it's actually not that. There's less space than you think out there because there's a planter just a bit in. You could only do your cafe directly in front of the building. It can't shift adjacent to it. Because
That's a zoning requirement, Christina?
So this is one of those lovely gray areas where the zoning code says, yes, sidewalk cafes should be allowed in downtown. And then right of way takes over and says, you need permission. And then we have another layer called downtown design review, which is an ordinance that doesn't fall under zoning or right of way, which lays out kind of design parameters. But keeping it in front of the building proper is pretty standard because you don't know what's going to go next to you, right? That might become another restaurant and you can't take their it would be, you want to be mindful about space. So yes, Fandango did have something out there. It probably wasn't as big as what you see now across the street with Principal and Rustica. Even without them using the parking spaces, they have a much larger cafe area. So and South Street is a non-option, right? Because they need at least 5 feet, if not 6 feet clearance between the building face, the facade of the building, and the nearest obstacle. So South Street is pretty much not available for that because of how it narrows on the side street. It'd be interesting to see, and I don't know off the top of my head how big of a space they can get, directly in front of them with the planter right there and the crosswalk, right? You got to keep the crosswalk clear too, because they're right on a corner.
Well, that 20 feet prior, between the handicap section and the crosswalk, that we wouldn't be able to put anything there just because that's a clear zone for the intersection there.
And thank you for all that information, Christina. I think, the person, the owner hoping to move in there in these times feels it's very necessary to be able to offer an outdoor alternative. And as Christina said, that space doesn't really allow for much of that. And so I think they were hoping to, on certain days of the week, not every day, but on certain days of the week, being able to move into the parking spaces like they're doing in front of Principals on the mall there,
May I share my screen real quick? Oh, you would have to give me permission, Anthony.
It's not me.
Oh, or
I
Karen.
believe the IT, could we?
You should be all set.
Okay, thank you. So the picture on Google is still with Fandango. So you can see that it's not really that big of a space between this planting area and the decorative curb. They can't technically use the entire face of their building, if you can see my cursor, which goes all the way across because of the traffic control device. Oh, did I go too far? I was trying to get a better angle. And the curb return area, which is pretty big. So I think there's, I see 2 tables out there, maybe 3 tables of 4. Just putting it out there, what was available before. So y'all can see it.
So I guess to me, assuming that the spaces, the other spaces that aren't occupied are not being used for loading for trucks, I'm not sure. There's a lot of businesses down there, and I know with the mall being one way, I'm not sure what those impacts would be. To move that handicap space to the other side of the road, because we need that handicapped space, we would effectively be losing one full-time parking spot all the time, regardless of if those tables and chairs were occupying a space or not.
Right. Although I would argue that perhaps, I don't know, can we uncouple these 2 requests? Because it's different, right? I mean, the parklet, the city's allowance of parklets at the loss of a parking space is a slightly different conversation than, could the handicap space either shift down south or move across the street? I think, because you could have that second request for other reasons, I guess. But.
And they are separate. I mean, I threw that out there because that is the future hope, but that is a completely different conversation, that they would
if you uncouple them, then you're moving a handicap space further away from the area where a lot of trips are generated, I would,
Or you're moving it closer to the next block where there are trips generated. It's
I
all
just,
downtown.
yeah, I would think that you're moving it away further from us, from the center of that. Again, if Dennis, if y'all want to go look at it further, I don't
Yeah.
guess I don't have a super strong feeling, but just trying to kind of point out some of the issues.
Why don't you go ahead, Leslie, and you can set up a meeting, send me an invite or something, or for next
Okay.
week, and I can come out there and meet with you all.
Yes. All right.
But I think from an accessibility standpoint, they should be fairly equal on both sides of the road. Yeah, maybe a tree in the way, but
Do we have a map that outlines where all of the handicap spaces are designated on street?
I do. I mean, I do that we use for our use.
It'd probably be worth sharing with Dennis.
Oh,
Yeah.
If
I'll
we're
email it to you. Yeah.
in meeting the principles that Anthony said, which are legitimate, you want them fairly evenly spaced.
mhm.
Mhm. Sure.
This
Sure.
may or may not impact that, but if we don't have the full map, we can't really make that call.
Okay. I'll email that.
all right, so we'll table that one and revisit that one as well. But I like the conversation and I like being able to work through that, and that rash decisions aren't being made. So that's great.
Yeah.
Anything else on that one before we move to our final new item for today? Okay. We will move on, pulling up the agenda for parking sign restrictions on South Edward Street. I don't know if anyone can really speak to that or has.
I was going to mention Anthony. I've been out to that site and looked at it. Jesse and I reviewed that, and he had some of the history. I guess the taxi stand was for the previous user out there. Right now, it's not being used. In view of that, and I asked to have this on the agenda, but I probably administratively could have just taken care of it as traffic engineer. And I think right now, what I'd like to offer is I'm going to had proposed to eliminate that taxi stand standing limitation, and just as a traffic engineer. And then in the future, if the business opens or changes, I'm open to relooking at it, and we can make adjustments for a new property owner or go like that. But in the meantime, I change it back.
How far of a stretch was that, Dennis? I mean, how many spots do you think could be created there
Oh,
for to turn it back? Or
it's quite a bit. I 8, 10. It was
Really?
quite a long stretch. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. So if there's no objections, I can go ahead like that. And I don't think and again, we could change it back in the future. I don't have a problem with that at all.
I would be very comfortable with that. And again, if you and Leslie are down there and want to talk about what restrictions, if any, might need to be placed on those times, or I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay.
Is that business closed now, the Wild Bull?
Yeah,
Did
it appeared to
okay.
be. Yes.
Yeah, that I remember when they were put in specifically for that. It was so crazy busy, and the taxi cabs and limos and all that were going all the way out to South Street and all the way back to Pitcher, and just creating quite the problem. So I remember when that was created specifically for that establishment.
Great. That sounds good. That'll conclude our new business for today. There is no old business.
I have a question that might fall under old business, though not on the agenda, which I motioned to approve earlier, so I apologize if I should have added that. I just wanted to get a status. Somebody reached out to me today about the Vine parking sign changeover. I had someone reach out earlier today wondering what when that work was going to happen, because last we talked to everybody, we kind of said spring. And I know that there were a couple of issues that did cause a delay. Do we know when that have those been resolved, and are we able to kind of say when that work will start?
Dennis, I don't know if you have any additional details or more recent, but yeah, the issues that were existing were able to be resolved. That took a little bit longer than we expected. There were some approvals and commission meetings that needed to take place in order to get contracts set up. But at this time, I believe we are cleared to go, and actually work had began prior to those problems. So
Okay,
as
great.
far as getting work orders set up to make those changes, to implement the parking changes. And Dennis, I don't know if you have any other updates, but we should be good to go.
Yeah, what I really just need to do is get with Brian and say, start cutting work orders. I may have just one slight bump. It's getting the newest version of RoadSoft in, but I've already coordinated with Scott to do that. So it might be a couple days here or there for Scott to be able to do his thing. But yeah, we're ready to do it. We're ready to go.
Great. Before we get too far into the work, what I really want to do is send out, I had kind of held off on the press release stuff because it looked like it wasn't going to happen. So I want to make sure that that we are trying to be timely and letting people know that change is happening. So I'll get with Amanda Cockcroft over in communications to kind of restart that process.
Yeah.
And I will make sure, Dennis, that, I'll loop you into the conversations so we're not sending anything out of turn or too far in advance or.
Okay. Yeah, we're ready to go.
Okay. I'll reach out to Amanda today. That was my only item. Thank you.
All right. Any other miscellaneous? Well, I guess that'll conclude old business. And we'll go into miscellaneous comments or concerns. I do not have any. If anybody else does. All right. Well, we will close that as well and move on to public comments. Are there any public comments for today?
Yes, there's one public comment.
Yes, my name is Jeff Wiseman. I'm a lifelong resident of the city. I live in the downtown, and I just had the experience of waiting for the train, watching detoured cars and so forth down by Ferguson's, down by Harrison. The train was exceptionally long. Those people heading east are being directed north on Harrison Street, which was a total mess. I don't know why people are not directed down Gibson Street or down Pitcher to Gibson if they're heading out east on Kings Highway, which a lot of them are, or they could still cut across. You have them directed down towards Patterson, which is really crazy. But, I waited in traffic for probably 15 minutes, and I'm watching all these cars, and it's just a cluster. You got a mess. I don't know who puts out the map for these detours, but they need to learn about city streets and where people are driving. Because right now with the east side, Michigan Avenue closed off, it's a total mess. Anyway, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
All
And
right,
that is the only public comment.
thank you. So again, just to remind everybody, kind of the scope of the traffic board as it exists today, as it's, ordinance. Uh, our primary concern is for traffic or parking regulation and parking ordinances. We've in the past we've kind of used this group to talk about traffic calming and other traffic related items. Um, but as it stands today, we really are this group is brought together. Their only concern is parking related issues, and that's the way it's written currently in city ordinance. Now, if that should that change, should we expand? That's some conversations that have happened. It's not really anything wanting to get into today. Maybe for a later, more interesting traffic board meeting, and kind of talking with members and trying to look and see what that could be like. But real quick, I'll say something, Dennis, and if I'm missing anything, let me know. In regards to, we have a couple issues that are mentioned right there. One being with our train detour for everyday train traffic, and then also something we're encountering downtown right now for the next about 6 or 7 weeks is the bridge work being done by MDOT on Michigan Avenue. Currently, all of the eastbound traffic is being detoured off of Michigan Ave because it's closed in that direction and only allowing westbound, when in a couple weeks they will actually reverse that and it will be only eastbound traffic that'll be allowed to move forward across the bridge, and they will detour westbound. If you look along Michigan Avenue, many blocks to the west, before those train tracks, before Westnedge, before you actually enter into the downtown portion of Michigan Avenue, there are a series of detour signs that flash to get traffic off of Michigan Avenue. And there's actually several locations that vehicles are directed to take park. And then picture as well is signed before you get all the way down to Harrison. Obviously, local traffic knows that there is Rose Street and Gibson, as mentioned, several other northbound routes that traffic can take. So in addition to our daily detour traffic, there are signs and flashing detour routes that are encouraging vehicles to get off Michigan Avenue well before the train traffic becomes an issue. And then again, as part of this construction project, there's additional signage and message boards to detour traffic, just letting them know that even if there is no train, you still can't go all the way east to the eastern side of the city. So, Dennis, is there anything extra on that?
No, I've been checking the traffic out there, and we had asked the highway department to put extra signing there. I'm going to take a look at it. I've been by during normal traffic times, and about a good third of the traffic diverts up on those other side streets, as Anthony was mentioning. But I hadn't actually encountered when a train was there. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna ask Ron to take a look at it, make sure our preempt is working correctly because of this, or might need to be adjusted a little more. So we'll take a look at it over the next couple of days and see if there's anything else we can do to help, especially when the trains are there.
Certainly. Okay. On our agenda, it has our next meeting. If there are items, it will be September 9th at 2 p.m. and it will be another electronic meeting as far as I know, due to our current COVID protocol. If there are any agenda items, please send them to Karen Rutherford to get onto our agenda by September 1st. If there are no other comments, would somebody please make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
This is Christina, second.
All right. Assuming there are none to object, we will adjourn this month's meeting, and I really appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.